Imagine being forgotten by your own family and years later becoming the person who saves them all. That is exactly what happened to Joseph in Egypt. His own brothers sold him as a slave, and he faced many hardships, including injustices, imprisonment, and years of loneliness. But God had a greater plan. At the right moment, Joseph not only became the governor of Egypt, but he also received a special gift: 2 sons, Manasseh and Ephraim. What many people do not know is that these boys, born in a foreign land, became leaders of 2 of the most important tribes of Israel. But why did Jacob, their grandfather, make such a surprising decision when blessing them? Why did Ephraim, the younger one, receive the greater blessing instead of Manasseh, the firstborn? And how did these tribes influence the future of Israel? In this video, you will discover incredible details about these brothers, the unexpected blessing they received, and the impact they had on the people of God. Get ready for a story full of twists, valuable lessons, and the astonishing divine providence. Joseph was a young man with a dreamer's heart, deeply loved by his father Jacob, but intensely envied by his brothers. Their father's favoritism and the dreams that indicated a grand future stirred growing hatred in them. Overcome with jealousy, they decided to get rid of him and sold him as a slave to Ishmaelite merchants, who took him to Egypt. Far from home and deprived of his freedom, Joseph faced painful trials, but God never abandoned him. In Egypt, he was bought by Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh. With intelligence and faithfulness, he distinguished himself as an exemplary servant and earned his master's trust, being placed as the administrator of his house. However, his integrity was tested when Potiphar's wife, driven by desire and frustration, tried to seduce him. When he rejected her, she falsely accused him, and Joseph was thrown into prison. Even behind bars, his faith remained unshaken. There he interpreted the dreams of 2 of Pharaoh's servants, the cupbearer and the baker, correctly predicting their destinies. Years later, when Pharaoh had an enigmatic dream that no one could interpret, the cupbearer remembered Joseph and recommended him to the king. Before Pharaoh, Joseph revealed that the dream was a divine message. Egypt would experience 7 years of abundance, followed by 7 years of severe famine. Impressed by his wisdom and discernment, Pharaoh elevated him to the position of governor, making him the highest authority in the kingdom after himself. From a humiliated slave, Joseph became the administrator of the entire land, saving countless lives with his visionary leadership. Beyond power and prosperity, Joseph also built a family in Egypt. Pharaoh gave him Asenath as his wife, the daughter of Potiphar, priest of On. Although she was raised in a different culture, Joseph never abandoned his faith in the God of his fathers. From this union, 2 sons were born. The first, Manasseh, was given a name full of meaning: God has made me forget all my suffering and my father's house. It was not that Joseph had erased his past or stopped loving his family, but the pain no longer consumed him. He had been restored and transformed, proving that even in the worst circumstances, God can rewrite the story of those who trust in him. The second son of Joseph was named Ephraim, whose name carried a powerful truth: God has made me prosper in the land of my affliction. Egypt, which had once been the setting of his suffering and slavery, became the place of his restoration and triumph. God not only sustained him, but also exalted him, turning his pain into purpose and making him an instrument to save many lives. Despite living among the Egyptians, Joseph never forgot his roots. He taught his sons about the God of Israel, the promises made to Abraham, and the land that would one day belong to them. Manasseh and Ephraim grew up surrounded by the greatness of Egypt, but Joseph ensured that they never lost the identity of the people chosen by God. The devastating famine that Joseph had predicted arrived, spreading across many nations. However, thanks to his wisdom and administration, Egypt was prepared, becoming the center of hope for the hungry who sought food. Among those who came in search of provision were Joseph's own brothers, unaware that the powerful ruler before them was the same brother they had sold as a slave many years earlier. At that moment, Joseph had the perfect opportunity for revenge. He could do to his brothers what they had done to him. However, his heart was no longer enslaved by hatred. He chose forgiveness. God had given him a new family, a greater purpose, and an extraordinary destiny. The young man rejected by his brothers was now a prince in Egypt, the father of 2 great tribes. and a divine instrument to save his people from destruction. The years passed, and Jacob, the patriarch of Israel, reached the end of his journey. The man who had fled from Esau, worked for many years for his wives, and faced so many trials, was now old and frail. For a long time he believed that Joseph was dead, but God granted him an unexpected joy. His son was alive and ruling over Egypt, being the most influential man after Pharaoh. With weakened vision and sensing that his days were numbered, Jacob made a decision that would forever mark the history of Israel. He called Joseph and his two sons, Manasseh and Ephraim, to grant them a special blessing, something that would change the destiny of generations. Joseph entered with respect and deep admiration. He knew that this moment was not just a family tradition, but a prophetic act that would define the future of his descendants. His sons, Manasseh and Ephraim, had grown up in Egypt, surrounded by the culture of that land, but Joseph had taken it upon himself to teach them about the God of Israel and the promises made to their ancestors, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Now, before their grandfather, they were about to receive something that would change their lives forever. Jacob, already elderly and with weakened vision, fixed his eyes on his grandsons. Although his eyes could not see well, his spirit clearly discerned what was happening. With a firm voice he declared, "Ephraim and Manasseh, sons of Joseph, who were born in Egypt before my arrival, are now mine. They will be counted as Reuben and Simeon." Those words surprised Joseph. His father was adopting his sons as legitimate heirs, elevating them to the same level as his older brothers. This meant that Joseph, through them, would receive a double inheritance. 2 tribes would be born from his descendants, ensuring him a special position among the sons of Israel. Overcome with emotion, Joseph led his sons to Jacob so they could receive the blessing. As was customary, he positioned Manasseh, the firstborn, to his father's right, for the principal blessing was meant for him. Ephraim, the younger one, stood to the left. Everything was arranged correctly, following the ancestral tradition in which the eldest son always inherited the greatest blessing. But then something unexpected happened. Jacob crossed his arms. His right hand, which carried the principal blessing, rested on Ephraim's head, the younger son. Meanwhile, his left hand remained on Manasseh. Joseph became uneasy upon noticing this. Something was wrong. He could not allow such a great mistake at such a crucial moment. "My father," Joseph exclaimed, trying to correct the placement of the patriarch's hands. "You made a mistake. Manasseh is the eldest. The principal blessing belongs to him." But Jacob only smiled slightly and shook his head, showing that this was not a mistake. He knew exactly what he was doing. Jacob smiled gently, and with a calm voice replied to Joseph, "I know, my son, I know. Manasseh will be great, and from his descendants will come a powerful people. But his younger brother will be even greater, and his offspring will become a multitude of nations." Faced with such an unexpected gesture, Joseph had to accept that this moment was not just a family tradition, but a divine revelation. Against all expectations and customs, Jacob granted the greatest blessing to Ephraim, forever altering the destiny of the tribes of Israel. That was not a mistake, but a prophecy. God, in his sovereignty, often chose paths that defied human logic. Just as Isaac was chosen instead of Ishmael, and Jacob instead of Esau, now it was Ephraim who received the greater blessing, even though he was the younger one. Time would prove that Jacob's words were more than just a simple declaration. In the future, the tribe of Ephraim would become one of the strongest in Israel, being the birthplace of great leaders such as Joshua, the successor of Moses. Manasseh would also grow in strength and influence, but he would always remain one step behind his younger brother. God's promise was being fulfilled. After generations of slavery and a long journey through the desert, Israel was finally at the gates of the Promised Land. Canaan, the fertile and abundant land, awaited the people whom God had freed from Egypt under the leadership of Moses. And now, with Moses dead, it would be Joshua, son of Nun, from the tribe of Ephraim, who would lead the conquest and guide the Israelites to the fulfillment of the promise. From the moment Jacob crossed his hands and reversed the blessing, Ephraim carried a special calling. He was not the firstborn, yet he was uniquely set apart, becoming a powerful, influential tribe that, over time, took great pride in its position. Upon entering the Promised Land, God determined the division of the land among the tribes of Israel. Since Joseph did not receive a tribe directly, his sons Ephraim and Manasseh were counted separately, each receiving their own portion of inheritance. Thus Joseph, through his sons, was granted a double portion of land, a unique privilege given by God, honoring the suffering and faithfulness of the one who was once sold as a slave but became the governor of Egypt. Under the leadership of Joshua, the leader of the tribe of Ephraim, the Promised Land was distributed among the tribes of Israel. Manasseh received an extensive territory, being the only tribe to have its inheritance divided into two parts. Half of his tribe settled east of the Jordan River in a fertile region that had been conquered even before Israel's crossing. This portion was shared with the tribes of Reuben and Gad, who had also chosen those lands for their abundant pastures. The other half of Manasseh settled west of the Jordan, occupying a vast area north of Ephraim's territory. Ephraim, in turn, was given a central position in Canaan, with rich and strategic lands, making it one of the most influential tribes in Israel. Within its borders was the city of Shechem, where Joshua established one of the nation's main spiritual centers. Additionally, the tabernacle of the Lord was set up in Shiloh, within Ephraimite territory, making the tribe the religious heart of Israel for many years. Jacob's prophetic blessing was fulfilled with precision. Over time, Ephraim became the dominant tribe of the northern kingdom. Its political and military strength was so great that in various biblical passages, the name Ephraim came to represent the entire northern kingdom. During the reigns of Israelite monarchs, the tribe exercised great influence over the destiny of the people, but this position of prominence also brought challenges. Over the years, Ephraim's self-confidence turned into pride. The tribe began to see itself as superior to the others, expecting to be recognized and consulted in all important decisions of the nation. When they were left out, they reacted with resentment and indignation. This arrogance became evident during the period of the Judges, when God raised up leaders to deliver Israel from its oppressors. One of the first episodes where Ephraim's pride was exposed occurred during the time of Gideon. Gideon, from the tribe of Manasseh, was chosen by God to free Israel from the oppression of the Midianites. With a small army, he faced a numerous enemy and won in a surprising way, proving that true strength was not in the number of soldiers, but in the power of the Lord. However, instead of celebrating the victory, the Ephraimites became outraged. "Why did you not call us to war from the beginning?" the leaders of Ephraim asked furiously. They were not concerned with Israel's liberation, but with the fact that they had not been given the spotlight in the battle. They felt offended for not being consulted and now demanded an explanation. Gideon, with wisdom, avoided a greater conflict. He responded diplomatically, praising the Ephraimites for their contribution at the end of the battle. "What you have done is even more important than what I did at the beginning." His words calmed their anger and prevented an internal war. But that episode revealed something dangerous about the heart of the tribe of Ephraim. They desired recognition above all else. If during Gideon's time the Ephraimites had already shown pride and resentment years later, this behavior would lead them into a bloody confrontation. During the time of the judge Jephthah, Israel faced a new threat: the Ammonites. This enemy nation constantly attacked Israelite lands, bringing destruction and suffering. Then Jephthah, a warrior rejected by his own family, was chosen by God to lead the defense. With courage, he gathered an army and achieved a crushing victory against the Ammonites. And, just as had happened before, the Ephraimites appeared only after the war. "Why did you not call us to fight?" they protested, this time with even more serious threats. They went so far as to declare that they would destroy Jephthah's house. But unlike Gideon, Jephthah did not seek to appease the situation. He did not yield to the pride of the Ephraimites. He responded firmly, "I called you, but you did not come. So I went to battle without you, and God gave us the victory." The Ephraimites, unable to accept that the glory of victory did not belong to them, made the worst possible decision. They declared war against Jephthah. It was a fatal mistake. Jephthah, determined not to yield to Ephraim's arrogance, gathered his warriors and set out for battle. The clash was brutal, and the outcome was devastating. Thousands of Ephraimites were killed, and the tribe that once saw itself as superior was humiliated. That defeat was not only military, but also a deep blow to Ephraim's pride, which had always sought recognition above all else. For many years, Ephraim stood out as one of the most powerful tribes of Israel. Its territory was prosperous, its warriors were feared, and great leaders emerged from its ranks. Over time, its influence grew so much that when the kingdom of Israel was divided into two, Ephraim became the dominant tribe of the northern kingdom. But instead of using this position to lead Israel in the ways of the Lord, Ephraim followed a dangerous path. Proud of its greatness, it began to drift away from God, giving itself over to idolatry and rebellion. The power it held was not founded on obedience, but on pride. And, like every empire that rises without solid foundations, its downfall became inevitable. Ephraim's decline began after the death of King Solomon. His son, Rehoboam, took the throne and, instead of ruling with wisdom, imposed heavy taxes on the people, treating them harshly. Dissatisfaction grew, and the 10 northern tribes rebelled against him, breaking away from the kingdom of Judah and forming an independent kingdom known as the Northern Kingdom, or simply Israel. The leadership of this new kingdom fell to Jeroboam, a man from the tribe of Ephraim. From that moment on, Ephraim became the center of political, economic, and military power in the Northern Kingdom. Its name began to be used by the prophets as a synonym for the entire nation. However, along with this influence came a fatal choice: the abandonment of true faith. In his eagerness to maintain control, Jeroboam feared that the people would return to Jerusalem to worship in the temple and decided to create a new form of worship. He ordered golden calves to be set up in Bethel and Dan, declaring that these were the gods who had brought Israel out of Egypt. It was the beginning of a cycle of apostasy that would lead Ephraim and the entire northern kingdom to ruin. Ephraim's great mistake, like that of the other tribes of the northern kingdom, was abandoning the Lord and turning to pagan idols. Driven by the fear of losing control over the people, Jeroboam made a disastrous decision. To prevent the Israelites from traveling to Jerusalem to worship in the temple, he created 2 golden calves and placed them in Bethel and Dan, proclaiming, "Here are the gods who brought you out of Egypt." 1 Kings chapter 12, verse 28. From that moment on, idolatry took hold of the northern kingdom. One mistake led to another, and the kings who succeeded Jeroboam continued in the same path, distancing the nation even further from the true God. The prophets were sent to warn them, but their words were disregarded. Hosea, Amos, and Isaiah cried out tirelessly for repentance, but Ephraim and the other tribes preferred to follow their own will. Among these prophets, Hosea was one of those who most strongly warned about the tragic fate that awaited Ephraim. He compared the tribe to a naive and senseless dove that sought alliances with other nations instead of trusting in the Lord. He also declared, "Ephraim mixes with the nations. It is like a cake not turned." Hosea chapter 7, verse 8. This metaphor carried a profound meaning. Just as a cake that is burned on one side and raw on the other, Ephraim had become spiritually inconsistent, contaminated by foreign influences, and unable to sustain itself. Its fate was sealed, yet the people still refused to listen. For many years, God exercised patience and mercy, sending prophets and giving countless opportunities for Israel to repent. But divine patience is not infinite when a people deliberately choose rebellion. Then, in the year 722 before Christ, the prophecy was finally fulfilled. The powerful Assyrian Empire under the command of King Shalmaneser marched against the northern kingdom with an unbeatable military force. City after city fell before the Assyrian army. The fields were devastated, and finally Samaria, the capital of the kingdom, succumbed after a brutal siege. The survivors were taken as prisoners to distant lands, scattered among the Assyrian peoples. The 10 northern tribes, including Ephraim and Manasseh, were dissolved over time. What was once a strong and united people now became only a dispersed memory among the nations. They never again reunited as a kingdom. The prophets had warned tirelessly, but their words were ignored. Hosea proclaimed, "My people are destroyed for lack of knowledge." Hosea chapter 4, verse 6. The glory of Ephraim was not enough to save them. Neither their power, nor their influence, nor their achievements could protect them from the judgment of God. They rejected the Lord, and in the end, they reaped the consequences of their own choices. The story of Ephraim is not just an ancient account, but a warning for all generations. This tribe had everything: divine blessings, wealth, territory, and influence. Yet, they chose to follow their own ways, trusting more in their strength than in God. Pride blinded them, idolatry corrupted them, and in the end, they lost everything. This lesson still resonates today. No human power can replace the presence of God. No political strategy, wealth, or influence can sustain us if we turn away from the Lord. True security lies in faithfulness to Him, not in the fleeting glory of this world. Ephraim disappeared as a unified people, but its story continues to echo as a reminder for those who have ears to hear. May we learn from their mistake and never turn away from the living God. Now write in the comments if you already knew the story of Ephraim and Manasseh in the Bible. Share this teaching with more people. Leave your like and subscribe to the channel to follow the upcoming videos. May God bless your life.